Hey guys, I hope you don't mind that I'm coming to you very barefaced. I will probably cry in this video, and also I have this rogue hair right here. I keep trying to tuck him under. I don't know why it's a him. I shouldn't assign gender to hair, but whatever. I am barefaced and I kind of just woke up because I wanted to talk about this last night, and I put a poll up on Instagram and I said, what are you guys' thoughts? Should I talk about it? I'm inspired to talk about it because of someone on Twitter. I will include their @ right here, but they had said that they were dealing with a lot of anxiety since a few things had gone wrong with their life in regards to their animals. And I related to it, and it's been something I've wanted to talk about, so I'm not wearing any makeup because I'm just gonna probably cry it off. And this is gonna be a bit more of a chatty or a serious video, and if that's not something for you, please don't comment below that she talks too much in this video, because that's literally what this video is. So keep your comments to yourself, okay? Okay. In February of this year, so right now it is currently September, which is crazy. I feel like this year has gone faster than any year I've ever lived. But in February, my dog Freeway passed away, and we had to put him to sleep, and he was 16 years old. And it wasn't like, of course it was sad, but it wasn't a big deal because I knew it was coming. Hold on, that water bottle's empty. As I was saying, I had to go refill the water bottle for my rats. My dog Freya passed away in February, but I knew it was coming for like a few months before that, and I'm the one who made the decision to put him to sleep because I knew it was time. Of course, it wasn't an easy decision to make, and it was an emotionally upsetting time, but I knew he was gonna die, so I was like okay with it in my mind. You know, he lived a long life, 16 years, it's a long time. But then 2 weeks later, very suddenly, my gecko Osha passed away, and it was so traumatizing because all the animals I've ever had pass away, I've only had 2 that died unexpectedly, and I never had them for as long as I had Osha. Sansa passed away unexpectedly, only after I had her for a couple months, and it wasn't something that I did, so I feel like I took more comfort knowing that it wasn't something I had caused. And for Osha's it wasn't either, but I'll get to that in a minute. And then another death that I had was Champ, who was a tiger salamander, and again, he died literally so suddenly, and I had only had him for a few months, and yeah, I was affected by it, but I wasn't as affected as I was with Osha's. With Osha's, she had follicle stasis, which is basically where her body is developing eggs, but they're not really eggs yet, they're just the ovarian follicles. And instead of either reabsorbing them, which is what some geckos do, or producing them into full eggs, which is what some geckos do, her body held on to them, and they expanded in her body, and they expanded in her body, and they pushed on her internal organs and caused organ failure. Now this sounds like something I should have been able to notice, right? Her abdomen wasn't more bloaty than any other time I had seen it. She was still pooping. She had gone off food, but I figured that was normal for her this time of year because the past year she had done that as well. She's a gecko that brumates, and then right after she's done brumating she goes into ovulation, and she doesn't really lose weight from it either. She's pretty good about holding weight on, or she was pretty good about holding weight on. One thing to know about Osha is that she had stunted growth, and in fact I would go so far as to say she had some sort of dwarfism because her head was a normal size and her tail looked normal, but her middle, her torso, and her legs were small. So it's kind of like dwarfism in what you see in humans or other animals, and that's what it reminded me of. But regardless, she had stunted growth and she had a humpback, so her body naturally arched like this. So there wasn't a lot of room internally for ovarian follicles or for really much else, and I think that's why it happened so fast with her, because 1 week she was fine. I started noticing problems with her shed, and then I noticed that she just was looking really lethargic, and I called the vet, and the day before the vet appointment she died. It happened so fast, within a week. It was horrible, and just the fact that she like slipped away from me so fast before I could even do anything for her was so traumatizing, and it made me worry about all the other geckos in the house, especially what the hell is happening down there? Jesus. Anyways, it made me worry about all the other geckos as well, because before the necropsy came back, one, I said, for something to have acted this fast, like, what if there's some sort of something that could affect the other geckos? So then I was panicking for that. I was panicking because I didn't know basically what happened to her. And when I got the necropsy, which, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, a necropsy is basically an autopsy. I had my vet perform one the next day, and they said they saw ovarian follicles in her body, and that's the cause of death. Follicle stasis is sometimes preventable, sometimes isn't. We don't know the cause of Osha's. Sometimes you can see it in geckos that don't have enough calcium, but I don't have a problem with giving my geckos calcium. I've been keeping geckos for 5 years, so we think that in Osha's case, it was just a matter of like her small body and just how it happened. It just happened. And knowing that it was something that happened so fast, something that was out of my control, horrified me. Because if it's something I did wrong, right, I could feel guilt about that, and I could make sure it doesn't happen again. But if it's something that it wasn't in my control, it could happen so suddenly to any of the other geckos. So I immediately went into panic mode from February until probably June. And after Osha died, a bunch of my other geckos, who have never laid eggs before, decided to start laying eggs. And I handled it well, but I also didn't. So like, in the physical sense of making sure everybody was taken care of, I handled that well, but mentally, I was in turmoil. So my youngest gecko, Egret, wasn't even full grown yet, decided to lay 10 eggs this year, a total of 5 clutches. 10 eggs. My gecko, Roz, who is an enigma, who wasn't like really full of weight, she's one of the enigmas that doesn't hold weight well, she decided to lay 5 clutches, 10 eggs. She's also just barely, she was barely a year old at this time. Or she was gonna, yeah, she was over a year old, but she wasn't that old yet. Typically, you expect geckos, I mean, some geckos who are over a year old lay eggs, but I have had geckos who are over a year old who never lay eggs, so I wasn't really expecting it from Roz, and I wasn't expecting it from Egret. So between them, they laid 20 eggs. Guess who else laid eggs this year? Renly. I've had Renly since 2015, and Renly has never laid any eggs, and in her former home, they said Renly was a boy, which means Renly never laid any eggs for them either, because otherwise they would have known she was a girl. So Renly, at the age of 10 years old, 10, decided to lay her first eggs. Fortunately, she only laid 1 clutch, and she was done. Then, Melisandre decided to lay eggs. And Melisandre is an enigma. She's in this house with the cardboard. We'll talk about that in a minute. Melisandre decided to lay 2 eggs. Only 2. Thank God, because they were enough trouble as it was. She became egg-bound. Took her to the vet. Vet said she didn't see anything physically wrong aside from the fact that she was holding on to the eggs. She said take her home for 2 weeks. If she doesn't lay them, come back in and we'll give her a hormone, like a stimulant, to make her go into basically gecko labor and push the eggs out. Which she said is really risky. So we have to like up her calcium intake via like a syringe. So then I had to give her calcium every single night to make sure, I don't know, the vet explained it perfectly, but I'm not the vet, so I just followed her instructions. But she said that it could cause her body to go in some sort of shock if she didn't have like a surplus of calcium, so I had to give her a surplus in preparation for this stimulant, this hormone stimulant. And fortunately, Melisandre decided to lay the eggs, but she laid 1 egg the week after the vet, and then she laid another egg a week after that, the night before I was supposed to take her back to the vet. So she laid her eggs separately, which is weird, by the way, and the eggs that she laid were hard, so they had begun to calcify in her body. And ever since she laid those eggs, which I'm very happy she laid on her own, by the way, but ever since she laid them, actually ever since she started ovulating that year, so ever since she started developing those eggs, her enigma syndrome has been double worse. Like, it has been a lot worse, visibly, noticeably worse. And now she is so sensitive to everything that I have to keep cardboard over the front of her house to provide extra darkness, because enigmas are light sensitive, and on top of that she has red eyes, she's an albino. So on top of having held on to her eggs, now her syndrome is worse, and she has to have cardboard in front of her house, and feeding her has become a little bit more difficult. She misses more often. She death rolls a lot. Oh, it's like my worst fear when I have enigmas is that, because all of them are girls except for Edard, is that they will lay eggs and that their syndrome will become worse. And I really, really don't want that to happen. So I had 4 of my geckos lay eggs. In the past, 2015, 16, 17, 18, wait, is that 5 years? How am I counting wrong? 4 years. In the past 4 years since I first got my leopard gecko Fritz, I have only had 1 gecko ever lay eggs, and that was Arya. And I had gotten her from somebody else, and she laid eggs like right after I got her. Again, she was with Sansa, and they had quite a few health problems that had to be addressed. But never have any of my geckos laid eggs except Arya. And like I said, I had just gotten her, so I figured some sort of outside influence probably contributed to that. And then this year, when my gecko Osha dies from follicle stasis, I have 4 geckos lay eggs, 2 of which were super young, super small, and decided to lay 10 each. Another gecko decided to hold on to her eggs and become egg-bound. I cannot tell you just the stress. Like, after the girls, Ygritte and Roz, laid like a few clutches, I started to relax a bit, because I was like, okay, their bodies got this. And I had to feed them like so much extra to be able to, you know, keep that weight on them, because egg producing takes a lot out of a gecko. But nonetheless, it was so stressful. And during this time, Tormund's little eye started to act up. So I had to take Tormund to the vet. The vet said she couldn't see anything. She like squirted something in Tormund's eye so that it would react, and she said there's no injury in it. It reacted fine. She can't see anything. It's a really tiny eye, so it's hard to see. So I told her that I had terramycin at home. I think that's how it's pronounced. And it's an antibiotic eye ointment. And she said, go ahead and try that. I tried that 1 time. 1 time! Oh my gosh. 1 time. And Tormund's eye was back to normal. So we have no idea what it was. Tormund could have just been acting weird, and I could have saved myself some money by just using the ointment at home. But because of Osha, every single thing that, like, I typically wouldn't overreact to, and I typically would have handled myself, a vet visit every single time. Including 2 vet visits for Melisandre, one of which I didn't have to go to because she laid both of her eggs. I had a vet visit for Brianne, a vet visit for Tormund. Who else? I feel like I'm missing someone. I probably am, but now I can't remember. Anyways, so let's talk about what happened to Brianne. So the first thing I noticed about Osha when she was sick is that she didn't shed her whole body. One night I walked in the pet room and I saw that Brianne hadn't shed her whole body. So I immediately went into panic mode. Immediately. And then a couple days after that, she started having weird poops where she would only poop the urate, so only the white part. I called the vet, of course. Even though I had called the vet, I'm really ashamed to say this. When I noticed Brianne's poop wasn't normal, I had a panic attack. And I haven't had one in like 4 years. And I was so ashamed of myself because I pride myself on being able to control my overreactions to things, because I overreact naturally. I'm a very anxious person by nature, but I have become very accustomed to being able to control myself, and I couldn't. So in addition to losing Osha, Freeway, having all of the stressors of the geckos, I was angry with myself because I was falling apart. And I wasn't finding joy in my animals. And I wasn't I wasn't all together. Like, I was losing it. Like I said, it had been 4 years, and I was so... Hi, Jackson. He can tell I'm not upset. He's a good boy. Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, we've disappeared. How you doing? You smell like the outside. Did you have fun outside? Yeah? Did you have fun outside? Hmm? And he's gone. So, in addition to losing Osha, losing Freeway, going through all the stresses of the pet room. Oh, don't hit the tripod, baby. Basically, I was so ashamed of myself for not keeping it together. And having my first panic attack in 4 years. I used to have them all the time when I was younger. Like, literally a couple times a week. And for anyone who doesn't know what a panic attack feels like, it feels like you're dying. It feels like a heart attack, and it feels like you can't breathe, and it just feels like the worst thing in the world. And when I had mine with Brianne, I couldn't breathe. I lost my vision. It was horrible. My mind just couldn't stop. I was so overwhelmed. And it gets worse because the next day, Brianne had another weird poop. Maybe it was 2 days later. And I decided to give her a soak because I figured maybe she just has a big poop that she needs to pass. Oh, by the way, the reason I was freaking out is because one of the signs of follicle stasis, even though it didn't happen with Osha, is not pooping because their body can't, like, their organs are being crushed by the weight of the follicles, so they can't pass poop. That's something that's supposed to happen. It didn't happen with Osha, but I figured, oh god, it's happening with Brianne. And she was ovulating like all the other geckos in the house because it was that time of year, so I was panicking. And I decided, okay, maybe it's not follicle stasis, calm down. It's not a super common condition. I gave Brianne a warm soak. Brianne, being the wild child that she is, I put her in this little container with a lid. As I was putting the lid on, I snuck my finger in there to, like, push her tail back so her tail didn't get caught in the lid. You know, I'm very careful about that. The last second, Brianne shoved her hand up and it caught her finger, and I cut her finger off with the lid. It was dangling. It was still hanging on and it was dangling, the tip of her finger. And then I had to make an emergency vet appointment, take her to the vet so they could cut off the rest of her finger, and then she was on pain medication for a solid week. Of course, she acted like a total champ. The vet said that she's never seen a gecko behave so well with their toe dangling, and she had to have the rest of her toe cut off because I didn't see. It's like everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. So she got her toe amputated, came home. And what did she do as soon as she came home? She had a normal poop. Like, had I just waited like another couple of days. But because I was so panicked about Osha, I overreacted, just like with Torment. And so a lot of this from February to June was just turmoil, just me trying to avoid, because Osha had gone so suddenly and so out of my grasp. It wasn't anything that we could determine that I caused, so I felt like at any second another one of them could die, especially since everyone was starting to lay eggs and ovulating. Oh, sorry. So, Brianne's toe healed, Torment's eye went back to normal, all the geckos laid their eggs, everybody is fine. Nobody passed away. But it took me from February until June. June's about when everybody stops ovulating, by the way. It took me from February, when Osha passed away, till June, which was just a few months ago, to like get this cloud lifted off of my head. And I talked to a few people in the pet community about this, just like in DMs personally, a couple of friends who have been very kind and who have always been kind, honestly. There's a lot of super, super nice people in this community. For as much of a bad rap as it gets, is it bad rep, like reputation? I don't know. For as much of a bad reputation as it has for being filled with drama and backstabbers and blah, 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 it's really not like that. Like, I feel like it's over heightened just because of a couple people, whereas the majority of people are actually like super great in DMs and really understanding, and yeah, they're good people. But I was able to talk to a few people about it, and it helped, but like, of course it doesn't fix everything, but it was just nice to know other people might feel the same way or have experienced the same thing, especially like at the beginning of this video I referenced the Twitter user. Their name is Ariel, and I saw their tweet in regards to how they had just been in nothing but anxiety and panic because a few things have gone wrong, and I was like, oh my god, I totally relate to this. And I was like, I knew at some point I wanted to talk about all of this because it is something that people don't consider when they're like, oh, I want to get this pet and that pet and this pet. Things go wrong, and though I've never experienced anything like that in my 5 years of keeping reptiles, it did happen eventually. Aaron told me there was gonna come a time when things went wrong all at once, and I don't know why he said that to me. He said that to me like a couple years ago, and he was right. It was this year during the ovulation season. Everything, not everything that could go wrong went wrong, but a lot of things went wrong, and I wasn't mentally prepared for it. Osha's death really, really messed me up, and I was just in a state of panic for months. And so this is important for me to talk about. One, it's cathartic for me to talk about it. I've wanted to talk about it since last night, and I literally dreamt about it all last night, so I knew as soon as I woke up I had to talk about it. But it's also good because it's a side of keeping a bunch of animals that no one really touches on. It's not easy most of the time. It's a lot of work all of the time. It's very rewarding, yes, and I wouldn't change anything about the family I have right now. I wouldn't change it. I would change ovulation season to never, but you can't do that, obviously. I just don't ever want to give the impression that this is something attainable for most people, because it's not. Most people, one, are not interested in this many animals, and two, they're not interested in devoting that much of their time to this many animals, and three, no one thinks about the mental health problems that your animals can cause you. Everyone always is like, pets are so good for your mental health, and I've talked about that in a separate video. I don't believe anybody should rely on an animal for their mental health. You should rely on, I don't know, if you choose prescription medication, if you choose a therapist, if you choose physical activity. It shouldn't be another living animal. I get that they can be good for your happiness and your joy and your fulfillment in life, but they should never be the thing you rely on, because they are supposed to rely on you. I talked about that in a video. I had a lot of controversial opinions, but hey, that's what you get when you come to my channel, especially last year. Last year all I did was talk about controversial stuff, and then this year I've done nothing but bioactive builds. Who knows what next year will look like. Thank you for letting me vent about Osha. I'm sorry if it was a lot to take in. It felt like it was a lot for me, but again, I'm just like reliving all of this because I'm a few months removed now from that feeling of having that cloud over me where everything is just panic, everything is negative, everything is sad. All of my animals are doing really well. None of them are ovulating, thank God. Wait until February of next year though, because it'll start all over. I'm actually kind of wondering if like next year, as soon as like February to June happens, if it will be quite traumatic for me, as like a PTSD kind of thing. I'm just gonna have to wait and see. I really hope not, because all the past years of ovulation season have been fine, have been no problem, so I really hope that's not the case. I don't feel like plugging anything, like follow, like, all that stuff, or merch. I don't feel like plugging any of that, so I'll just see you guys in the next one. Bye.